Hello class, this is Ms. Sherman. I have put together this video tutorial to briefly go over calculating the anesthetic and vasoconstrictor dosages. Now each patient is going to be limited in how much anesthetic they can receive, either by the amount of anesthetic drug or the vasoconstrictor. Unless the patient is receiving an anesthetic without a vasoconstrictor, it's important to calculate for both of these to determine which one of them is the limiting factor. Some patients will reach their maximum based on anesthetic drug, and some will reach their limit based on vasoconstrictor. And much of this is determined by their body weight. To begin, you need to be familiar with several charts that are in your book. The first is Table 7.1, the maximum recommended dose per appointment, and it's found on page 89 in your book. Box 7.3 on page 90 is the drug dosages per cartridge based on the percentage of the anesthetic drug in the solution. And box 7.4 on page 93 is the volume of vasoconstrictor per cartridge based on the dilution ratio. The other table that will be important to know is 7.3 on page 93 that gives the maximum safe dosages of vasoconstrictor. This chart won't be provided, but it's pretty easy to memorize. Basically, a healthy patient can receive 0.2 milligrams of epinephrine per appointment, but a heart patient can only receive 1/5 of that, or 0.04 milligrams. The limit for levonorepinephrine is 1 milligram for a healthy patient and 0.2 milligrams for a cardiac patient. So once it's been determined which anesthetic drug you're going to be using on your patient, whether it be lidocaine or articaine, mepivacaine, prilocaine, or whatever, you'll need to keep 3 maximum recommended dosages, or MRDs, in mind. First is the absolute MRD for whatever particular anesthetic you're using. For example, looking at Table 1, we can see a list of the MRDs for each anesthetic. The other is the patient's MRD based on their body weight. This must be calculated using the milligrams per pound on this same table. The last is the MRD for the vasoconstrictor you'll be using, whether it be epinephrine or levonorepinephrine. Let's begin by looking at a 100-pound patient, and you want to give them 2% of lidocaine plain, meaning that the anesthetic doesn't have any vasoconstrictor in it. So it's important to determine the patient's MRD based on this information. Now the absolute MRD for lidocaine over here is 500 milligrams. Whether it has vasoconstrictor or not, this pertains to anyone of all weights. To calculate the MRD for this particular patient, we must multiply their body weight, which is 100 pounds, by the milligrams per pound for lidocaine, which we can see here is 3.2. So 100 pounds times 3.2 milligrams per pound, and I use my calculator here, and we can see that's 120 milligrams. Now this is well under the MRD for lidocaine, so her weight limits her to receive no more than 320 milligrams of anesthetic. But how many carpules is that? To convert that to carpules, we see in box 3 that each carpule of 2% lidocaine contains 36 milligrams of drug. So by dividing 320 by 36, we got 8.88 cartridges. So that means that this patient can have a little bit over 8 3/4 cartridges of lidocaine. Here is an example for you to try. Go ahead and stop the video, and when you're finished, start it and we'll go over it together. So for this example, we have a 120-pound patient who will be receiving 2% of lidocaine plain, meaning it has no vasoconstrictor. Let's begin by determining the MRD for this 120-pound patient. So it's 120 pounds. We're giving them lidocaine, and 500 milligrams is the MRD for everyone, but it's 3.2 milligrams per pound. So let's go 120 pounds times 3.2 milligrams is going to equal 384 milligrams. This is well under the 500 milligram absolute MRD for lidocaine, so her weight limits her to receive no more than 384 milligrams of anesthetic. But how many carpules is that? To convert that to carpules, we see in box 7.3 that each carpule of 2% lidocaine contains 36 milligrams of drug. By dividing the 384 milligrams that she can have by 36 milligrams in each cartridge, that gives a total of 10.66 cartridges. So that means that she can have a little over 10.5 cartridges of lidocaine. Okay, our next example. Now, going back to our first patient, what if our first 100-pound patient was going to get 2% lidocaine with 1 to 100,000 epinephrine? All other calculations are the same in that she's limited to 320 milligrams of lidocaine or 8.88 cartridges. But let's calculate how much epinephrine that would be. 1 to 100,000 epinephrine has, we can see right here, 1 to 100,000 epinephrine in a 1.8 milligram cartridge has 0.018 milligrams of vasoconstrictor in each cartridge. So if our patient can have 8.88 cartridges and each cartridge has 0.018 milligrams of vasoconstrictor, then that is a total of 0.159 milligrams of epinephrine. For a healthy patient, the MRD is 0.2 milligrams, so this patient is limited by the anesthetic drug, not the epinephrine. Here's an example for you to do. Stop the video and try this example on your own, and then come back and we'll do it together. So, our 120-pound patient will be receiving 2% lidocaine at 1 to 50,000. All calculations are going to be the same regarding the anesthetic. The patient's limited by her body weight, and she can't receive more than 384 milligrams of lidocaine, or 10.66 carpules. But let's calculate how much epinephrine that would be. 1 to 50,000 epinephrine has 0.036 milligrams per cartridge. If our patient can have 10.66 carpules and each carpule has 0.036 milligrams of epinephrine in it, then that's a total of 0.38 milligrams of epinephrine. The MRD of epinephrine for a healthy patient is 0.2 milligrams. This is over the MRD for epinephrine for this patient. So how many carpules can this patient have based on epinephrine alone? If each carpule of lidocaine, 1 to 50,000, has 0.36 milligrams of vasoconstrictor in it, and the maximum MRD for any healthy patient is 0.2, then we figure out how many carpules that is by 0.2 being the total anyone can have divided by 0.036, the amount per cartridge, and then that equals 5.55 cartridges. So the limiting factor for this patient is the epinephrine. So looking at this, the MRD for lidocaine is 10.66, but this patient's MRD for vasoconstrictor is 5.55. So the limiting factor for this patient is epinephrine. Let's do the same calculations for a patient who weighs 230 pounds and will receive 1 to 50,000 epinephrine. Determine the patient's MRD for lidocaine. They weigh 230 pounds, and you'll multiply that by lidocaine's milligrams per pound chart at 3.2, and that will equal 736 milligrams of lidocaine based on the patient's weight. Now, this is over the absolute MRD for lidocaine, which is 500 milligrams. So this patient can have no more than 500 milligrams of lidocaine. But how many carpules is that? So let's figure that out. If the MRD is 500 milligrams and each cartridge has 36 milligrams of anesthetic in it, that equals 13.8 cartridges. So this patient can have no more than 13.8 cartridges based on anesthetic alone. But let's determine how much epinephrine that is. A 1 to 50,000 carpule has 0.36 milligrams, 0.036 milligrams of epinephrine, according to box 7.4. 13.8 cartridges times 0.036 milligrams of epinephrine per cartridge will equal 0.49 milligrams of epinephrine. Now, this is way over the MRD of 0.2 milligrams. So epinephrine for this patient is the limiting factor. But how many carpules can he have of 1 to 50,000 epinephrine? If each carpule has 0.036 milligrams of epinephrine, the MRD for epinephrine on a healthy patient is 0.2 milligrams. Then we'll divide 0.2 with 0.036 per cartridge, which will equal 5.5 cartridges. So our 230-pound patient can only have 5.5 cartridges. Let's do a couple more examples. A 150-pound patient received 3 carpules of 4% articaine, 1 to 100,000. How many more carpules can this patient receive before reaching their limit? First, notice here that articaine has no MRD, so we don't have to worry about that. Next, let's determine the MRD for this particular patient. They weigh 150 pounds. The milligrams per pound for articaine is 3.2. We see right here. So that equals 480. This patient can't receive more than 400 milligrams of articaine, but how many carpules is that? Let's take 480 milligrams, divide that by how much anesthetic is in per cartridge. So we have articaine at 4% at 72 milligrams, and that equals 6.6 cartridges. But let's check the epinephrine. If he's had 3 carpules of 1 to 100,000 already, Okay, that's 3 carpules times how much epinephrine is in a 1 to 100,000 carpule, which is 0.018. That will equal 0.054 milligrams of epinephrine that he's had so far. Now, keeping in mind that the MRD for epinephrine on a healthy patient is 0.2 milligrams, and if he's had 0.054 milligrams already, 0.2 minus 0.054, he can have an additional 0.146 milligrams. Now convert that into carpules. So if he can have 0.146 and each carpule has 0.018 milligrams of epinephrine, then he can have an additional 8.1 carpules. So this is the amount of cartridges he can have additional based on anesthetic. This is the amount of cartridges he can have based on vasoconstrictor. So for him, the anesthetic solution is the limiting factor at 6.6 cartridges. Now for this next one, go ahead and stop the video and give it a try on your own and come back and we'll do it together. Okay, this 150-pound patient received 2 cartridges already of 2% lidocaine at 1 to 100,000 epinephrine. How many additional cartridges with the same drug can be administered before reaching their MRD? The MRD for lidocaine is 500 milligrams. What's the patient's MRD? So we'll take their weight, 150, and we'll multiply it by 3.2. And we get 480 milligrams is their MRD. If they've already received 2 cartridges so far, which is a total of 36 milligrams, here we see at 2% lidocaine, 36 milligrams per cartridge, and they've received 2 of them. So they've already received 72 milligrams of lidocaine. So they can still receive a total of 408 milligrams. All right. Their epinephrine MRD is 0.2. That's for all healthy patients. With 2 carpules of 1 to 100,000, they've already received 0.2 times 0.018 per cartridge equals a total of 0.036. That's how much they've already received. So they can still receive 0.2 minus 0.036. They can still receive 0.164 milligrams of epi. Change that to cartridges. 0.164 divided by 0.036 per cartridge will equal 9.11 cartridges. Okay. So they can still receive 408 milligrams of lidocaine. They can still receive 0.164 milligrams of epi. Here I didn't, let's convert this to carpules. How many carpules can they have? So 408 divided by 36 milligrams per cartridge will equal 11.33 cartridges of lidocaine. So after calculating all the limitations and what they've received so far in anesthetic drug and vasoconstrictor, the limiting drug here is the epinephrine at 9.11 cartridges. One last example. Let's take a look at a cardiac patient. A cardiac patient weighs 190 pounds. You want to give them mepivacaine with levonorephrine 1 to 20,000. Now, the absolute MRD for mepivacaine is 400 milligrams. To calculate the MRD for this particular patient, we'll multiply their weight, 190 times mepivacaine is 3, which will equal 570 milligrams of mepivacaine, which is what they can have. This is over the 400 absolute MRD for mepivacaine, so the patient can only have 400 milligrams of mepivacaine. But how many carpules is that? So let's take 400 and divide that. Mepivacaine is 2%, so 2% solution has 36 milligrams of drug in it. So 400 divided by 36 equals 11.11. But calculate for the vasoconstrictor. If mepivacaine is 1 to 20,000, it has 20,000. We see here each carpule has 0.09 milligrams of vasoconstrictor in it. And we know that the cardiac limit for levonorephrine is 0.2 milligrams. But calculate for the vasoconstrictor. If mepivacaine 1 to 20,000 has 0.09 milligrams of levonorephrine per carpule, and the cardiac limit for levonorephrine is 0.2 milligrams, then 0.2 divided by 0.09 equals 2.22 carpules. So for this patient, because of their cardiac restriction, can only receive 2 carpules of mepivacaine 1 to 20,000. So those are my calculations for anesthetic drugs. I hope this has helped in understanding how to determine what the patient's limits are and also for documentation purposes. If you have any questions, please shoot me an email and I will try to answer them for you if I can.